Welcome, Doomheads and Doomettes, ghouls, goblins, and gals, and dogs, and cats, and everything in between. Happy New Year, and you are now in the New Year of the presence and the deliverance, and on the other ends of the one-stop shop of all things horror, the incredible, the intelligible, if that's a word, the sarcastic, the bombastic. They call me Mr. Fantastic. Your boy, the one and only Walterdoom. And this show is Let's Talk About Horror. Yes. And we are back. Well, I am back. There's no me in here. I hope there isn't. Maybe the voice is in my head. I don't know. But we are back here for another year of terror, fun, news, and excitement, and just all the things I want to talk about. I know that ending was just like very lame, though. But how are you guys doing? How are you? We are officially in the new year of 2021. We have finally made it out of the mess that was 2020. I can't believe we made it through. I didn't think we were going to make it through. At least for the last 2 weeks, I didn't think we were going to make it through because those last 2 weeks just seemed like they were just really, really dragging along. I don't know who else felt that way, but it really just felt like we were never getting out of this. I mean, I felt like at any moment a meteorite was just going to crash land into Earth, and it was just going to be the last fuck you for everything that's happened in 2020. But that did not happen. So I am glad that we are here. And you guys are now in the presence of greatness. Clap it up one time. Alright, so besides being all silly and goofy and all that, if you guys are not following me already, you know my social medias are Walterdoom1 on Twitter, Walterdoom on Instagram, and if you are listening to this on YouTube or any streaming platform at that, just know vice versa, I'm on every platform. So if you're listening to me on YouTube, you can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, wherever else. This is coming through Anchor, so you guys know I'm on every platform. But if you are listening to me on any of those streaming platforms, yeah, find me on YouTube. Give me a follow. I need my subscribers up. And speaking of subscribers, you know, if you are listening to on YouTube, yeah, drop a like, drop a comment. Tell me how much you either like this podcast or you hate it. I'm not going to get hurt by it because, I mean, I frankly don't give a fuck. So that's just how I feel. It's 2021, new me, new attitude. Well, same me, new attitude. That's all it is. It's new year, new attitude, same me, same awkwardness. Yeah. So for today's episode, we are going to go ahead and I'm going to do like a bit of a, not really a countdown, but just my 10 best favorite films. As you guys know, last year was a very tumultuous time for the film industry because we didn't get really much of our favorite movies coming to theaters. Between like delays, pushbacks, postponements, or just straight release to streaming platforms, a lot of our movies that we wanted to see were kind of either up in the air or they were restructuring plans for them. As you guys know, for those that are really paying attention out there to the news, but for those who don't, you know, all the mainstream movies like Halloween, Candyman, Saw, they're all being released coming around 2021 of this year. But as far as like lower graded movies, maybe like the companies didn't really believe in those films all too much. I'm looking at you, Antebellum. They were definitely released this year. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and give you guys my best 10 movies that I've watched through streaming platforms. A lot of these movies, they are, I want to say, Netflix, Shudder, or Amazon heavy, because those are the companies that actually release these films. But not only that, these films you could actually watch at your own time. And if you never watched it before and you leave from this podcast and actually go out and watch those films, definitely go ahead and do that. Some of these films are worth seeing. But with that being said, I am going to give you my 3 disappointing films from 2022. Meaning, I know the way I said it, it sounds like I'm saying 2022, but I'm not saying 2022. I'm saying from 2020, space it out, 2, as in that 2. But now it sounds like I'm sneezing. But yeah, I'm gonna give you guys my 3 disappointing films from 2020. Meaning, like, these films weren't necessarily bad, but they were definitely hyped up to the point where, like, I was expecting a little bit more from these films, but they ended up being more disappointing than just captivating in any way possible. So I'm pretty sure, and this is a spoiler, one of the movies that I talked about recently in a podcast, cough cough, might actually make it to one of the most disappointing films. You guys might already know after that little hint, but if you don't, just sit back and relax a bit. But yeah, with that being said, here's some stuff that I want to talk about before I go into the rankings. Like, these rankings are definitely based on my own opinion, in my opinion only. You don't have to necessarily like what I say, but I mean, if you do, hey, that's more power to you. But if you don't, hey, more power to you. I really don't give a fuck. But yeah, I mean, if you don't really like what I say and you have so much anger, then fuck off. But yeah, these movies are movies that I pretty much enjoyed, that I thought were just very great. I thought they were stunning in many ways possible than another. Also, these films are not ranked in like any particular order. Not at all. So if you think I'm going like ranking one of your favorites that you feel like it's an overall number 1 film, that's necessarily not the case. I'm not ranking it based on where I see fits. It's actually more of, these are just 10 movies that I'm bringing together that I kind of like, that I thought were really dope, and that you guys should really check out. So yeah, without any other things I need to say, let's go ahead and get into this shit. Alright, so my movies break down like this. La Llorona, a Shudder movie that y'all should check out, directed by J.O. Bustamante. Come to Daddy, another Shudder film starring Elijah Wood, directed by Ant Timpson. Spiral, another Shudder movie directed by Curtis David Harder. Nocturne, an Amazon Prime movie, director Zoo Quirk. Black Box, director Emmanuel Osei Kiefer Jr. Color Out of Space, a movie starring Nick Cage, director Richard Stanley. Cleansing Hour, a Shudder movie, director Damien Levesque. Host, director is Rob Savage, another Shudder movie, by the way. His House, a movie that's on Netflix, directed by Remy Weeks. And last but not least, Invisible Man, which you could watch on HBO Max, director Lee Whannell. Alright, so those are the movies. So now let me get into the reasons why I chose those movies in particular. So let me start off by saying I chose some of them based off of their story. So I was choosing movies that had a very compelling story that was kind of relative to just me, or just to any societal issues at hand that I could kind of like, understand and relate to. And whether I am somebody that really is dealing with those type of issues, whether I'm dealing with them or not, if it's executed right and I understand the issues that's going on in the film, I pretty much chose it just because of that. So movies like Spiral, Invisible Man, La Llorona, Nocturne, and Come to Daddy. So I do like the fact in La Llorona, it does kind of touch base with the whole how they reinvented the character herself. For us horror fans who know the story of La Llorona, it's a breathtaking venture to actually see them reinvent this character. And instead of her just stalking a bunch of kids throughout a film, she's now taken on this dictator who pretty much claimed like a lot of lives. And one of the lives that he claimed during this genocide that him and his army was doing, which is based in Guatemala, by the way, if you haven't seen the movie, she pretty much is trying to seek vengeance against him. She's not necessarily trying to take the kids that are even in the film, even though we are being treated as if she is going to take like his granddaughter, but she is not trying to take the granddaughter. She's trying to get the general himself because of all his sins and crimes. Another movie that really is like has the compelling story about like a very big societal issue was the biggest film I believe is of all of 2020, which is Invisible Man. And the thing is with Invisible Man, if you ever seen the classic movie, which I have, it's not really one of the best classic movies to watch. I mean, it's amazing visually just to see the effects and how they managed to kind of like get away with a lot of like how they made the Invisible Man invisible without the use of like major technology like green screens or what have you. You know, a lot of it is pretty much practical effects. But with this movie, the new movie that came out by Lee Whannell, this one takes a different venture, a different turn, I should say, than the original film. So this film is more focused on abusive relationships. And just like Midsummer of last year, I mean, not of last year, I'm sorry, because it is 2021, because of Midsummer from 2019, Invisible Man kind of takes that route of abusive relationships a step further, which I do like, which gets it up for me. And we get to see like more of the PTSD factors coming from an actual abusive relationship. So I really do like what they did with this film. It's very innovative, and it just makes you sometimes think like the main character, Cecilia, who is played by Elizabeth Moss, which did a perfect job, by the way. I really did like her in this film. For just even like liking her in it, and well, the character herself, and just like maybe sometimes not even liking Cecilia because I thought she was just a little batshit crazy. But even like with all that being said, I mean, there were points of the movie where I just thought Cecilia might have actually been the more toxic one, or the one that's probably like a little more crazy than what she's trying to place on her ex-boyfriend Adrian. But this film is definitely like one of the best films that I gotta say was out there. A couple of movies that were kind of like under the radar that do have compelling stories. Spiral, which focuses on like this same-sex couple who move into this town, and with this story, this film focuses on like certain prejudice that people have towards like, I guess, certain like issues, like say like, you know, same-sex couples, maybe black rights, maybe Islamophobia, what have you. So Spiral had more of like a Get Out type feeling, and this was one of those films that I was just like, I was kind of late to the party in watching it because I watched it around that December time, which I was trying to make this list all come together. And when I was watching this film, I thought it was very compelling how they just took this couple, and by the way, this is placed in the 90s, by the way. They took this couple who thinks like they're moving into a town where everybody's going to be accepted of who they are, but turns out are not really accepted of who they are. And what this film does, it kind of like brings in all those elements of about how like somebody may be for you, but they are not with you. So like in one of the scenes, the couple, Malik and Aaron, by the way, which is the main character's names, they're having dinner with like their neighbors, and one of their neighbor's husband says like, well, I wish more people would just judge people by who they love. Like let's let love be love. And the character Malik, who is pretty much like prevalent throughout this whole story of the movie, he sits there and says like, well, not everybody thinks like that. And that's because Malik actually seen his ex-boyfriend, and I say ex, or should I say late boyfriend, get beat down by a group of guys who were homophobic. And the thing is that I do like this film because it does remind me a lot of like Jordan Peele's Get Out, where like you think like you're in a safe space, but really it's a little more insidious than what you think. Now, I thought like Aaron, which is a spoiler, I thought Aaron was going to be part of that whole culty nature of the neighborhood, because they are pretty much a satanic cult who has been living through the test of time and actually have been living timeless because of like the rituals that they've done. Yeah, I thought Aaron was going to be part of it, but turns out he wasn't, in that him, Malik, and Aaron's daughter, Kayla, were all just plots to be sacrificed and ate alive and just used for like whatever sacrificial reason so they could keep living. And I do like the fact that at the end of the story that it moves into 2005. You know, Malik already left like a CD of like everything that he's learned about the town, and he's passing it on to whoever else comes into the town or actually lives in their house. Another movie, which is Nocturne, a movie that I wasn't really favoring at first. I watched it once. I was drunk, by the way. Note to self next time: when watching a new movie, don't drink. Oh man. But all jokes aside, I actually watched this film once, didn't really like it, didn't pay attention to it. I paid attention to it a little bit. I got the story, but I wasn't really engaged in the story, I should say. Rewatched it another day, a couple of days later, I should say. And I actually was really up in arms about it because it was definitely relative to me, or to anybody at that. If you ever been doubted in your life by anybody, meaning like if you ever had anybody that says they believed in you or believe in you, but they really didn't believe in you, this is what this would look like in this movie. And that's what was happening to the main character, Juliet, who was played by Sydney Sweeney. And I really do think like it was very intriguing to see like how with her and her sister, it was very intriguing to see how her and her sister, they were polar opposites. Like Vivian, who was her sister, she was more being supportive by everybody, by her family who were supporting her into going into Juilliard. She was being praised by her teachers. She was being helped by her mentor, Henry Cass. And it was just like, yeah, everybody in the administration believed in her being like the next big classical star or orchestra star. Whereas Juliet was being treated more, and this is the quote from her mentor, Roger, that she was just going to be nothing more than a teacher. And it just reminded me a lot about like, not only just when I was a child, but just like being an adult in general. How a lot of people you come in contact with, some people just want to test your shit and just always want to test you to see what you know and just scope you out to see where they lie in competition. To me, I don't really give much fucks about all that shit, honestly, because at the end of the day, I'm me, you know, I'm me, but in a sense of like for those that want to gain like notoriety or who are more into the illusions of grandeur, yeah, you will feel some type of way. You will feel very hurt. And in the movie, Julia eventually becomes like a student for Dr. Cask, and he tells her in a scene that is very poignant because it's like he tells her about how most great musical instrumentalists they don't go to music school. They are already playing concert halls. They are already being praised. They already be getting their feet wet and acknowledged for what they can do. And I really thought this movie really touched base on anybody that ever felt like, you know, they were counted out, that they were being disrespected for whatever skills they have. And no matter how much they try and like prove, they couldn't scratch that itch to get the notoriety that they deserve. Another reason why I chose these movies for like my top 10 was for the aspect of visually stunning imagery, and just like imagery that pretty much like not just for just looking pretty just for the sake of looking pretty or amazing or creepy or whatever, but for more of like it complements the story. So like with his house is very stunning visually to me. I really do like how they set a lot of the imagery up where you get to see like the creepiness surrounding the house that's being haunted by the ghost of the witch that is following them from Sedan, you know? And I do like the fact also that in one of the scenes you get to see Bowl, who is like the main character in the story, that how he feels like, you know, he's the only one that believes in nothing. Well, he believes in nothing really. He doesn't believe in the witch, and it takes a lot of convincing. And you get this scene where it's just like him at the table, and he's just like pretty much looking very isolated in that little world. But yeah, that movie is very visually stunning, as well as a good story being put in that film. Another one that was good, which is a sleeper, is Color Out of Space. And this is a Nicolas Cage film, by the way. And the thing about that film, I really thought this film was going to be one of those Nick Cage films that are just very weird and goofy. you know, like, I just, like, as we all know, most Nick Cage films are just weird and goofy. Like, if you ever seen the movie Mandy, which I feel like this was a step up from Mandy. I wasn't a fan of Mandy at all, but this film was a little bit better than that film. But just like Mandy, how Mandy was a little bit visually stunning, but not a good film. This one was actually better. This one was visually stunning and was a good film and had a good story that I could actually be sold on, for the fact that they're dealing with this meteorite that comes out of nowhere, lands in their backyard, and it causes this whole chain of kind of like a possession in a way, where this family is just now all of a sudden controlled by this rock. Some of the things that are pretty interesting to see is like when the family sees like the meteorite crashing down and you get this flush of like purple surrounding the whole area. That one was pretty interesting. What's also pretty interesting is like some of the transformation that happens to like some of their pets. Like you see like the dog ends up being transformed into something very disturbing. The horses, they become something a little more crazy looking. Not only that, also Nick Cage's wife and son, they end up
get infused together and they become like this disgusting looking fly like entity that they just end up trying to kill in the end because they just look crazy as fuck. But yeah, that's another reason why I chose that film. Last but not least, I chose also, and this is the main one, and this is also the most important one. How much did this movie freak me the fuck out? Like, because we all know in most horror films, you gotta be scared. Like, it gotta be something that kind of like brings a little bit of fear to you. So movies like Host, The Cleansing Hour, His House, Spiral, and Black Box, those movies were really kind of freaky to watch, you know? Especially with His House and how he was being hunted by all those people who were coming from like Sudan or from his country, and meaning the character Bo, and just they had to deal with the ghost of their past that would never leave them. Not only that, movies like The Cleansing Hour, that was like a very trippy film to watch because it dealt with like this character Max who was faking to be a priest, but in this taping of his internet show, which he fakes actually doing exorcism, he had to deal with a real life possession. Yeah, and the one that got possessed was his partner, and when I mean partner, not his like, husband or anything, but like his partner in crime. His partner in crime, Drew, who he's known for many years, Drew's wife is actually possessed by a demon. So Max has to spend while on social media, the time that he's on there to try and save Drew's girl. And I gotta say, like, throughout the whole film, it gets very demented the more we get deeper into the film. Between like people getting killed by like ornaments, people that are killing themselves because of a illusion that they see, so they end up cutting themselves. Oh man, that scene was like fucking crazy. But what was more demented was literally the ending of it. And it had like such a purge like ending. It was insane. I don't want to spoil it too much. I know I'm giving away some spoilers, but I don't want to spoil this one too much because I feel like this one was the one to watch. And if you ever thought about like how much a lie could affect a person or how it could eventually come to light, which was the message behind this. Every lie comes to light, I think this was the one to really check out, if you know what I mean. But that one's a Shudder film if you want to check that out. But other than that, yeah, those are my top 10. Those are my reasons why. Right now, we are going to take a break right now. And when I come back, I am going to talk about my 3 disappointing films from 2020. So like you shouldn't say in a scary movie, I'll be right back. And we back. And as I mentioned before, we are now going to talk about 3 disappointing movies from 2020. Now, once again, this is not like a list of like, oh, these movies are oh so terrible. We could leave that to 2019's film of The Ghost of Sharon Tate. That shit was like really terrible. I don't know who else thought Hilary Duff's acting was really good in that film. It was not. It was a train wreck. But these are more movies that like I felt like they garnered up like a little bit too much hype or a little bit too much recognition into trying to get people to watch these films. And maybe because they have a little bit of a backing system like a big major company like Blumhouse or Lionsgate. But in the end, like these movies just came and they fell short of what they were intending to do. And it's either because of just bad plot dialogue or just like overall just really shitty production, honestly. But without further ado, here's my three, and I'm gonna give you guys my reasons why. So first up is Antebellum. Is anybody really surprised about that? I talked about it in the last podcast, and the feeling is still kind of mutual. This movie is really disappointing in every way possible, but I will get into that in a moment. Next up, Netflix's movie Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight. I mean, we'll get into that one too. And last but not least, Amazon, which is also a Blumhouse production, The Lie. Now, I was kind of iffy about putting The Lie on here, concerning that, technically speaking, it's a 2018 film, which I didn't even know. According to IMDb, this movie came out in 2018, but considering that it is part of the Blumhouse production of the 4 movies that they're coming out with, this movie came out this year, so this is the only reason why it's literally on my list. But other than that, I mean, yeah. I don't know what else to tell you. But first off, let's talk about a couple of things on why these movies end up on my disappointment list. Number one is disjointed, muddle messages. Antebellum, I would have to say, is pretty good at muddling up everything that they're trying to say in their film. And I mean, this is going back to the last podcast when I was talking about how it's a good, like, theme wise, it's a good film. Like, I get what they're trying to do. They were trying to like have a story about if we do not learn from our past, we are doomed to repeat it. Plain and simple as that. I like the fact that they do have the story where she is in a reenactment camp, which is pretty much like, well, a reenactment camp for the Civil War, and that these people that kidnapped her pretty much are basically reenacting everything racist as possible. You know, they are trying to relive the days of the South. They're trying to have things like black people picking cotton, down to like the whipping post. I mean, again, we didn't see much whipping. I mean, honestly, I feel like this movie could have been a lot more gruesome if they weren't trying to give you the Easter egg of that this movie is, well, the setting in this movie is in present times and not in the early antebellum period. Another reason why I actually added these movies to this list, boring and predictable storylines. Now, once again, Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight. That one had pretty much a predictable storyline. Obviously, I knew the killers were the 2 twin brothers before they even mentioned that it was the 2 twin brothers that were the killers, and they got mutated by this meteorite, I believe. We have another movie with the meteorite transforming people, but yeah, it was this meteorite or this alien figure coming in and turning these kids into like what the thing looks like. It was definitely a predictable storyline that we were getting. Obviously, we knew who the final girl was going to be, was this really fucked up girl who was cutting herself and what have you. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it's nothing really like, I feel like wasn't worth watching. I feel like it was just bland at most. It was bland majority of the time. The Lie also is very predictable for the simple fact, and I'm not even like taking shots at Joey King, but her character was the absolute worst. I just could not stand her character, Kayla, because she just didn't do exactly what her parents were asking her to do. Like, she was trying everything in her power to just get them caught. And even though, like, we know, like, the overall lie in the end was her friend was pretending to be dead, pretending to be missing, so she could go see her boyfriend, which we obviously knew. Well, actually, I obviously knew by the time he got to the end of the movie that she wasn't really dead. Like, we didn't really get a body. Like, just, you knew she wasn't you knew she wasn't dead or washed up in a creek, just for the simple fact that dad ran over there to Kayla, and all of a sudden just the body is gone within a matter of seconds, washed up in the water. And looking at the water, when he jumped in there, the water wasn't even that deep or dense. It was really shallow. So to me, I was like, okay, how does he not find the girl? It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me at all. Yeah, it was a very predictable movie. It wasn't even worth the time of watching. It did have a very touching storyline about dealing with, like, being in a family of divorce, which I could see why it was a bit of a conflict between Kayla and her parents. But overall, I just thought it was just a very predictable movie, and yeah, it's a hard pass for me. And last but not least, like I said, once again, it's all anticipation and high expectations. And maybe that's more on my part of me expecting that, honestly. And I was just very excited to try and watch these films, especially with Joey King in her movie, for the simple fact that I like her acting in The Act. I couldn't wait to actually watch The Lie, because I thought it was going to be another good performance by her. But I mean, I gotta say, at most, it was definitely a mediocre performance. And this is probably just once again a movie where, like, this movie was filmed like sometime earlier in the years, and this apparently it came out in 2018, so she was probably still inexperienced. But The Act definitely kind of like solidified her as a actress. Same thing with Antebellum. Antebellum, I felt like, had a little bit too much hype. And here's the reason why I feel like it had too much hype. Because of the movie coming out during the time when the George Floyd situations were happening, we were thinking, like, okay, well, this is a movie that's going to really set the tone about how we need to, like, look at racial tensions, and or how we need to look at race relations, in a sense of, like, how we could all get along and how we could all learn from the past, and so we can move forward. But I feel like Antebellum did not do that, and it tried to bring a lot of, I want to say, feminist overtones into the film, which I feel like, okay, well, that doesn't help your message in the movie. Like, what are you really trying to say with this film? And I just felt like it was like way too many messages that they were trying to do. So yeah, I mean, I took an L for watching that one. And Nobody Sleeps in the Woods tonight. I mean, again, I love slasher films. Like, my main reason of starting this podcast was because of a slasher film, and because I wanted to talk about different slasher films and everything like that. I mean, maybe one day I might just do a Slasher's Corner instead of a must-watch Tubi movie of the week, It might be a Slasher's Corner, but that might actually be a good idea. I don't know. Maybe I can make that happen. I mean, it is my podcast, so yeah. Yeah, gonna take note of that one. But yeah, I was really hyped to watch this movie, but it is definitely a stinker. It is definitely not that interesting. I mean, it's bland, and the two characters, the two killers, You want to, sometimes when you watch a slasher film, you kind of want to cheer for the killer sometimes. And I mean, not in the sense of like, yeah, here comes a killer. Like, no, more like, oh man, that dude is hilarious. You know, like Chucky. Sometimes you want to cheer for Chucky because he's so fucking hilarious. Sometimes you want to cheer for Freddy just because you just want to see him terrorize somebody's dreams and give them one-liners. Sometimes you want to cheer for Jason, Michael, Art the Clown. And these are three characters who don't speak at all, by the way. So for those two twins who could not speak at all, and they were just as boring as they were, I could not deal with that movie. But yeah, those are my three disappointing films from 2020. What I'm gonna do again, I am going to take a break. So yeah, when I come back, we are gonna go into the outro. As you guys know, there's always an outro to the show. Now, usually, I give movie suggestions, but it's going to be a little different this time. So let me start by closing out this moment of saying, like, it's just a few closing moments, closing thoughts for, like, the closing of 2020. So I know for a lot of us, it's been a tough year. I mean, for me included. I mean, no one has really been exempt unless you're like really rich or whatever, we all struggled throughout this year. Some of us, we struggle mentally, some of us physically, some of us financially, some of us all three. But we made it through another year, and even though we had a lot of losses, a lot of struggles, a lot of tumultuous times throughout last year, we gotta also connect with the positives, some of the stuff that we managed to kind of come into realization from last year. For me personally, it was like, well, if we're speaking on the podcast, I was able to connect with some great collaborators, which I would have never known they existed if people in my own personal circle didn't really connect me with them. So shouts out to my boy for that one. But I just want to take the time to say shouts out to Dimey and Megan, for being like the great collaborators that they are, and the great content. I really don't want to say content creator, but the great content creators that they are on their platforms. It's always a pleasure to have them on the podcast. It's always a pleasure to talk with them. And even on outside of the podcast, it's always a pleasure to talk to them. So yeah, I'm very thankful for 2020 for connecting me with them. Also, I'm also glad, like, throughout that Halloween month, I was able to get, like, some of my greatest friends that I've known personally, whether it's through work or personal. They were able to come through and just sit at the podcast, on this podcast, and we just sat around, talked and clowned around like we usually do. And I mean, for a lot of you guys that did listen to those podcasts, I mean, you guys showed tremendous love for those podcasts. I'm also thankful for like starting another podcast outlet on the Stereo app with my good friend, the Timekeeper. And each week we are talking about different types of subjects that are kind of like relative to what we're going through every day. And yet, we're not trying to like be preachy or anything like that, but we try our best to kind of like keep you guys informed or give our take about what we think about what's going on in the world, as well as try and make you laugh from time to time. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm also thankful for like all of you guys that are sitting here rocking with me. I know I always call you guys my 5 fans or my 5 listeners and what have you. But we have grown a little bit throughout 2020. And it's been a nice little ride. You know? I'm thankful for everybody that actually takes the time to actually listen to the podcast. I'm appreciative of people who take the time to actually like what they listen to on the podcast, as well as those who comment from time to time. And the only thing I would hope for in 2021 is just more of what we were doing in 2020, but elevated a little bit more. So I'm hoping to like grow more with you guys as I'm continuing this journey of just exploring who I am and enjoying every minute of doing what I love, which is this. If I was not doing this throughout 2020, 2019, I don't know what I would be doing right now. Honestly. Honestly. I feel like this podcast has been like my greatest moment throughout 2020. Because it's connected me to a lot of great people and, you know, a lot of you guys that's out there listening right now. I mean, there's some people who follow me on Instagram, you know, talk to from time to time, and they're excited to just hear what I put out and just take the time and listen. I love the support and I love the energy that you guys are bringing. So yeah, with that being said, let's take a moment, have a moment of silence for just everything that has happened in 2020. I know I've done moment of silence before, but this is a moment of silence for not only just for like maybe all the great people, celebrities that we lost, but maybe like people in your own personal lives. Let's take a moment of silence for them. Let's take a moment for them to be in the spotlight, because I'm a regular person myself. I am nobody famous. I don't even care to be famous. Honestly, you know, I just care more to like connect with people that have the same interests as me, that want to talk about horror movies and everything horror related, you know, in the most utmost in the utmost funnest way possible. So yeah, let's go ahead, take a moment of silence for just everybody we kind of lost in 2020. All right, and we are back. So 2021, you guys, we are about to turn it up even more. You know, more collabs, more me, more podcasts, more Doom. I know, because I'd be disappearing for a while, but I mean, hey, you wouldn't be Doom if you didn't disappear, you know? But if you guys are wondering whenever I'm coming back, make sure, you know, you follow my social media pages. Instagram, Walterdoom. Twitter, Walterdoom1. Because some asshole took Walterdoom. Also, if you follow me on YouTube, just click that notification bell, you know? That's what it's there for. But other than that, I mean, if you listening to me on Spotify, Apple, Google, any of those platforms, definitely I will be posting almost on a weekly basis, but this is not my real job. This is only my fun time. So, yeah. I mean, if you fuck with your boy, come fuck with your boy. Also, Doom Time, stereo app, 11 to 1 every Wednesday. Check me and the Timekeeper out. We putting out decent content. Actually, scratch that. We are putting some hot shit content. Hot shit. But yeah, other than that, I am signing out for another episode of Let's Talk About Horror. R.I.P. MF Doom. This is America. Don't let them catch you slipping now. Peace. Oh yeah, and I forgot to add, bitches.